All right, we're ready to continue with systematic instruction. And now we're moving to response prompting. And specifically, this week we're going to be focusing on the system of least prompts. And one of the reasons I have this graphic down at the bottom is because I truly believe that this is one of the magical instructional strategies that we use with students with complex support needs. It is an instructional strategy that you will use for many skills across your career, and consistently you will use it. And so, why are we talking about response prompting and specifically in this case, the system of least prompts? And it is because this is what we do not want. We do not want students who are not engaged in instruction, and we can see this little guy is not paying any attention at all to what's going on other than whoever's taking a picture. And we also don't want adults who are performing tasks or skills for students rather than directly teaching those skills and the student learning them. Because in this case, this little fella is not learning a thing. Again, the adult is performing the skill for him. However, what we want to do, and one of the reasons we would be using or will be using the system of least prompts, is because ultimately our goal for our students is independence. And the system of least prompts is one of those wonderful instructional strategies that helps our students become more independent. So what I want you to do is to stop for a second. You're going to stop the video, and this will be one of the questions you'll answer in your document to submit to Canvas. But I want you to stop the video and write, what is the system of least prompts? All right, stop and think about that again. What is the system of least prompts? So go ahead and stop your video. This is just a quick write. You can do it as bullet points if you want. And then when you're finished, come back and we'll continue learning about the system of least prompts. All right, so hopefully you remembered some stuff from your readings for the week and then from your applied behavior analysis course. So when we're talking about the system of least prompts, like what is it? Well, one of the cool things about it is it's one of the oldest systematic instructional procedures for students with complex support needs. It has been used for more than 50 years with this population successfully. Not only that, the system of least prompts is an evidence-based practice for many domains under which you will teach your students. So it's an evidence-based practice for community skills, for self-help skills, for vocational skills, for academic skills. It has been effective in teaching functional skills, again, a variety of academic skills, communication skills, social skills, and more. And if you stop and think about the domains under which you're going to be teaching your students, you're going to cover all of these, or they're going to have instruction across all of these domains throughout their educational career. Some other things that are really cool about the system of least prompts is it's been used across a variety of ages, and not just school ages, but adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities with complex support needs as well. It's been used in both general education and separate educational settings. It's been used in community settings. It's been used in vocational settings. And not only that, peer mentors or peers of students have been taught how to use the system of least prompts, and this has been implemented across grade levels. So again, just a really powerful and magical, in my view, instructional strategy that's super effective for the students you'll be teaching or currently teach. So really, again, what is the system of least prompts? Well, it is a systematic errorless learning instructional strategy. Now we say errorless, but we do know that students make errors. So when you hear about errorless learning, if you're using the system of least prompts and a student makes an error, you're not going to beat yourself up, because it's really, while we call it errorless, it's either errorless or near errorless learning. But you use the prompting hierarchy, which you've talked about in the past and we looked at last week. And so remembering with that prompting hierarchy, you're going to have 2 to 3 prompts in an individualized student prompting hierarchy. And so with the system of least prompts, what happens is initially the student is given the opportunity to perform the task or the behavior independently. So after you give your attentional cue and your instructional cue or your task direction, I'm going to use task direction because that's more the language that I typically use. So after you give your attentional cue and then your task direction, you're going to give that response interval time for the student to perform the skill independently. And it's only if the student makes an error or doesn't respond that you then provide a prompt. And if they make an error or don't respond, then what you're going to do is provide the least intrusive prompt possible from their individualized prompting hierarchy. And that at least intrusive prompt, you're going to use that prompting hierarchy throughout the session. So we're not going to start with step one and I'm going to use prompting hierarchy A, and then when I move to step two, I'm going to move to prompting hierarchy B. That's not how it works. You're going to use that least intrusive level throughout, or level of prompting within the session and throughout the instructional session. So you're going to continue to prompt the student using their prompting hierarchy until the student is able to correctly perform the behavior. And that would typically be either they're performing the behavior or the step independently, or you have moved through the prompting hierarchy and they are now maybe using their controlling prompt. But the big thing to remember is we do not want to continue to prompt our students. As students acquire skills and require less assistance, our goal is to systematically fade those prompts over time. And so again, the system of least prompts is a prompting teaching strategy in which prompts are provided from an individualized prompting hierarchy, and you're going to move from the least intrusive to the most intrusive. And as you move through that prompting hierarchy, you're going to gradually increase the level of support until the student is able to complete the task over time independently. And so, kind of in layman's terms, and this is an example because this might be one prompting hierarchy, but in layman's terms, if a student doesn't know what to do, you're going to tell them. If the student still doesn't know what to do, you're going to show them. And if they still don't know what to do, then you're going to help them. And so in this example, then the prompting hierarchy might be that I'm going to give you a verbal prompt, and then I'm going to give you a gestural prompt, and then I'm going to model. But again, this is just one example of what a prompting hierarchy might look like. You're going to individualize those based on your students' needs. So now I want to take a second just to do a quick check-in of your understanding. So in the system of least prompts allows students to receive only the amount of assistance blank to perform a correct response or to engage in the behavior correctly. So again, the system of least prompts allows students to receive only the amount of assistance blank to perform a correct response. And if your response was necessary or needed, you are correct, because the system of least prompts allows students to only receive the amount of assistance that is necessary or that they need to demonstrate the skill or perform the skill correctly. And so just as a reminder, you're going to start by providing the student the opportunity to perform the behavior independently before you ever deliver a prompt. We're providing that response interval, and that is individualized. You're providing that response interval, and it's only if a student makes an error or does not respond that you then start with your prompting. You're going to start with the least intrusive prompt and then work through your prompting hierarchy from the least to most intrusive until the student can perform that skill or that behavior correctly and independently, because we're going to fade those prompts over time. So now here's another question. So you're going to stop your video in just a second and answer, how is support provided when using the system of least prompts? So this is a check-in for you. How is support provided when using the system of least prompts? Go ahead and stop your video, and I'll see you in just a second. All right, welcome back. So how is support provided when using the system of least prompts? And if you responded with the prompting hierarchy and moving from the least to most intrusive prompt, then you are correct, because that is how we provide support, is with the individualized prompting hierarchy, starting by providing the student with the opportunity to respond independently and then moving from least to most intrusive. And remember, that last most intrusive prompt is going to be your student's controlling prompt. All right. So you might be asking yourself, like, what kind of skills can I teach using the system of least prompts? And the good news is lots and lots and lots of skills can be taught using the system of least prompts. So you can teach discrete skills. And what are discrete skills? Just as a reminder, is that they are single behaviors that have a definite beginning and a definite end. So we think of these as one-step skills, and they need to be able to be observed and to be able and are able to be measured. So here are a couple of examples of discrete skills. One of them is turning off a light. It's just one step, click, and the light is off. So that's a one-step skill that would be considered a discrete skill. Another one is hitting a switch to say hello. You hit the switch, it says hello for you. That is one step skill. And then another example would be touching the grass. If the teacher gave the task direction, touch the grass, that's one step. Just got to reach down and touch it. So a system of least prompts has been successful in teaching discrete skills. Here's the other cool thing. It's also been successful when teaching chain skills. And as a reminder, a chain skill is a more complex skill that is made up of individual steps that when the student performs those small steps in sequence, then they perform them correctly in sequence, then they have completed whatever that larger task is. And so we think of these as a multi-step task where each of those steps leads to the next. And then when they're all completed together, then the whole task as a whole has been completed. And examples of those chain skills could be washing hands. Think about all the steps that are required in washing your hands. It could be writing high, because high has multiple steps in it. Or it could be something like subtraction, because again, subtraction is a multi-step task. So just to kind of share some words other than mine, so Dr. Pam Mims is a special education professor at East Tennessee State University, and this is her take on the system of least prompts. And so what she said is that the system of least prompts is one of my go-to response prompting strategies. And she also noted it's also known as least to most prompt system. This strategy is great as it has been successfully used to teach a wide range of skills, from functional to social skills, communication skills, academic skills. It's very easy to implement, and you can immediately start using it if your student does not respond to the stimulus presented. So again, this is another expert in the area of students with complex support needs, as well as a long-term teacher, special education teacher, and she states this is one of her go-to instructional strategies. And so when we're thinking about the system of least prompts and pulling on the information that we know about prompting hierarchy, these things go together. You can't have the system of least prompts without the prompting hierarchy. Again, these things, I always think of them as kind of being married. They always go together. Wherever they are, they're together. And so what I want you to do now is, before you stopped at the video and you wrote what the system of least prompts is, or what you remembered about it. But now I want you again to pull from your readings. I want you to pull from your past knowledge, your experience in the classroom, and I want you to share what you remember about the procedures for implementing the system of least prompts. So, not just talking about what it is, but what are the actual steps for implementing or the procedures for the system of least prompts. So, if you'll stop your video now and then just do a quick write with as much as you can remember about the procedures for the system of least prompts. I'll see you in a minute. All right, well, let's see how you did. So when we're thinking about the system of least prompts, this came out of the Belva Collins book on systematic instruction, but this is a flow chart for how you implement the system of least prompts. And again, just as a reminder that the system of least prompts is an extremely effective teaching strategy, and it is one that you will use regularly throughout your teaching career. So what I'm going to let you do right now is to give you just a minute, and I want you to read through the flow chart. First, I want you to read through the steps. So the first thing you're going to do is read through the steps one at a time. And then I want you to read through the steps again and look at the considerations. So steps first, then steps and considerations. All right, go ahead and go now. All right, if you need any more time, feel free to go ahead and stop the video in order to read through that. All right, so when we're talking about the basic steps, and we're going to go in a little bit more detail later on, but we're thinking about just the very basic steps for the system of least prompts procedure. These are the steps that you would implement. First, as always, you're going to give an attentional cue because we want to make sure our students are engaged and paying attention. Then you're going to provide an instructional cue or the task direction. You're going to then wait a predetermined amount of time. That is your response interval. So giving that response interval and giving the student the opportunity to first respond independently. And only if they don't respond or they respond incorrectly do you then provide the prompt. You start with the least intrusive prompt and then work through the prompting hierarchy until the student can perform the responses correctly and independently. So again, these are the basic steps for the system of least prompts. And so let's actually see what that looks like. And so in this example, what we want the student to do is we want them to touch dog. So we want them to be able to read or identify the word dog when given an array of 4 options. And here, I do want to let you know that this graphic is on Canvas, so it is a great resource that I encourage you, if you're new to the system of least prompts, to save, because then you can use it to fill in your instruction, because later on you will be creating videos where you're teaching using the system of least prompts. So here's what it might look like. The teacher says, listen, because she's given an attentional cue. Listen, and then she gives the task direction. Touch dog, and then she's providing the response interval. If after that response interval is given, the student responds correctly, the teacher then provides positive reinforcement. If, however, the student does not touch dog, and that could be because they don't respond or they make an error, the teacher is then going to move into the student's individualized prompting hierarchy. And in this case, the teacher is providing an indirect verbal prompt and saying, what is the first sound in dog? So she's just given a hint that the student has to think about. So the first step in the prompting hierarchy is the indirect verbal prompt. What is the first sound in dog? If the student touches dog, the teacher provides positive reinforcement. If the student does not touch dog due to error or non-response, the teacher now moves to the second step of the prompting hierarchy. And in this case, it's another indirect verbal prompt. However, it's more specific. So this time the teacher says, the first sound in dog is D. The first sound in dog is D. If the student touches dog, the teacher provides positive reinforcement. If the student does not touch dog, we're going to again continue. Now we're on the third step of the student's prompting hierarchy, and the teacher points to dog and says dog. After the teacher points to dog and says dog, then the student touches dog, and the teacher provides positive reinforcement. Again, that graphic is on Canvas for you to use as you need. I would just keep it because it's a great resource, especially when you're first learning how to use the system of least prompts. And so now I want you to stop and think about it. Go back and look. I'll go back one real quick. What was the controlling prompt in this prompting hierarchy? Give you a second to think. All right. So what was the controlling prompt in this prompting hierarchy? It was a model. The teacher pointed to dog, said dog, and then the student pointed to dog. So that was the controlling prompt. If you got that right, way to go. Excellent. All right, so let's just do a quick check. How are you feeling about the system of least prompts so far? I'm good with it. I'm okay, need a little bit more time with it, or I am lost and I have no idea what you're talking about. Just as a reminder, if you have any questions, specifically if you're here and possibly if you're here, I want you to write that down. Write it down. You can write it down on the document that you turn in so you don't forget. But I want you to make sure you write it down somewhere so that when we come together for class, you can ask your question and I can make sure that I answer it and that you have clear understanding. All right, this is the end of our first video for the week. Thanks so much.